Say what you will about Universes Beyond, but I got to buy a tax-deductible Spider-Man mask. I'm pretty excited about Carnage Crimson Chaos. It's a 4 mana 4/3 trample. Says when it enters, you return a creature with mana value 3 or less from the graveyard to play. It has to attack each combat if able, and when it deals combat damage to a player, you sacrifice it. And of course, what's really exciting about this card is you can Mayhem it for 2 mana. Mayhem is kind of like Madness. If you discard it this turn, you can cast it from your graveyard for the Mayhem cost. Only 2 mana to get a 4/3 Trampler, plus potentially a 3 mana creature that does have to sacrifice it in the turn. This seems pretty powerful to me. There are a lot of cards that are good to return. Stuff like Flage, Seasoned Pyromancer, Fear of Missing Out, Emperor of Bones, White Orchid Phantom, Fulminator Mage. These are all cards that give you value when you return them without having to attack and deal combat damage to a player for them to get value. Oh, Abhorrent Oculus is also really nice, where you can return it and you can attack if you're going to have lethal, but you could just like leave it in play and leave it just manifesting tokens over and over and over again. And Modern is a format that had Faithless Looting unbanned a while ago. Faithless Looting has seen a reasonable amount of play in stuff like Reanimator strategies and various like Hollow One shells, a lot of brews, but it hasn't really broken out. And I think that Carnage seems like a really, really nice tool for these archetypes. I like a lot that also if your opponent does have a lot of graveyard hate, this is still a 4/3 trampler that you could maybe give haste with Arena of Glory. Carnage seems really, really strong in general. And I'm excited to play with it. I really like when they print cards like this too, where like the Mayhem cost on this is something that you can be more aggressively printed because there are fewer enablers for it in Standard. In Modern, you have better enablers, so this card is more powerful in Modern. And it just does so many different things and goes with so many cards. You have a lot of different opportunities to try it in different shells. So I'm very excited for Mayhem. Look forward to seeing this in like at least 3 different decks. One of my favorite things about reviewing Standard sets in the context of Modern is that random goofy cards like Sandman just at first glance look completely unplayable, but slot really well into existing value packages. Sandman Shifting Scoundrels, a 3 mana star, has power and toughness equal to the amount of lands you control, can't be blocked by creatures power 2 or less, which is pretty relevant in the Affinity Boros energy world. But I think this is just a nice card to complement decks that are playing Risen Reef and Nissa, which is a package of cards that I like to brew with pretty often. It's an elemental, so you can put into your hand off of a Nissa trigger. It obviously triggers Risen Reef because it's also an elemental. And I like that this is a way for you to close games really quickly. When you're playing Risen Reef decks, a lot of times you're evoking Solitudes and copying Risen Reefs and playing multiple copies. You have a ton of lands into play, but actually killing your opponent can take quite a big time. So just having a creature that gets really big really quickly because Risen Reef puts a lot of lands into play is great. And a 3 mana creature like this that has the built-in resiliency of just if it dies to a non-exile removal spell, you just get to bring it and another land back is great. And sometimes bringing that land back might trigger landfall triggers not only of Nissa, but of stuff like Omnath, Springheart, and Nantuko. And I foresee myself playing at least one Sandman in my Nissa Risen Reef brews for the foreseeable future. Maybe you want to play more copies. Probably just one, but I think it's going to be really fun. I think it's going to be a nice addition to a package of cards I like to play pretty often. Arachne Psionic Weaver is kind of like a weird new 2025 Thalia. That's kind of how I'm thinking about it, at least. It's a 3 mana 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, you can look at your opponent's hand, and then you get to choose a non-creature type. So, instant, sorcery, enchantment, artifact, planeswalker, and spells of that type cost 1 more to cast. It also has web slinging, so this can be put into play for 1 mana. So, a 1 mana 3/3, look at the hand, tax your opponent's best card type. Seems really cool and interesting to me. In a lot of ways, it kind of reminds me of Mayhem, where it's like a new, powerful, cool, unique effect that just plays really differently from a lot of cards we have, and it really opens up your brain on how you can start building decks with it. So, of course, all web slinging cards are going to play really well with cards like Springleaf Drum and Relic of Legends that let you tap your other creatures so that you can just have a tapped creature that you can put into play without needing to like get through your opponent's blockers in combat step. Obviously, web slinging stuff just plays well with value ETB effects like White Orchid Phantom, Seasoned Pyromancer, Ajani, Orcish Bowmaster occasionally, stuff like this, where you not only do you get the cheap 3 mana 3/3, but you also get to reuse the ETB trigger. This is going to be something you're looking to do a lot with your web slinging cards. There is also an obscure combo that my Twitch chat put me onto today, which is Relic of Legends plus Arachne plus Spider-Man Webslinger. Spider-Man Webslinger is the same as Arachne. 3 mana 3/3 legendary creature, web slinging for 1, but Arachne is just seemingly much more powerful in the lore, has all of this extra text instead. um, but if you have both of them, you can go play one, tap into Relic Legends, make a white mana, and then you can just web sling each other over and over and over again, which can make infinite creatures entering the battlefield. So you could win with like Arabaz Mir, which just says whenever a historic permanent enters the battlefield, you ping for one or drain for one. And so these are two historic permanents entering over and over and over again. It sounds like a pretty convoluted 4 card combo. It is nice that you don't need any, you don't need to untap with anything. You can just do it all at once. Unlikely it's going to be a deck, but I might try it. I might try it. They're both humans too, so you do get like the human ETB triggers. I have played Relic of Legends humans before. I guess I'll dust that off for a video or something. But for the most part, I think this is going to be like a good value card in like white X decks, and probably not a Relic of Legends combo piece mainly, but it is also cool when this card is like pretty modern playable seemingly, and then it also has an infinite combo. That's usually a nice bonus. So keep an eye out for Arachne. I think that you could see it like a normal Boros synergy too, as maybe in the sideboard, maybe in the main deck. Just a lot that I really like about this card. I was really excited for Web of Life and Destiny when it first got printed. It's an 8-mana Convoke enchantment. And it says at the beginning of combat on your turn, you look at the top 5 cards of your library, and you can put a creature card from among them into play, and the rest on the bottom. This is, of course, seemingly a really powerful effect. You know, Modern is a format where you have a lot of strong enablers like Springheart Nantuko, Grist, where you get to get a lot of extra creatures in play faster than you can in younger formats, and then cheat out this big 8-drop. Now, I was really excited for this card when it first got spoiled, and I was really thinking a lot about like pairing it in like more of these like green-white value birthing ritual decks. You've got guides and prides, and you're hitting like solitudes, and you're hitting your warp cards, and you're hitting your Gearhulks. Then I kind of remembered what it was like brewing with Ancient Imperiosaur, which it cost a whole mana less for the Convoke. And this was a card that could become a 2020 Trample Ward 2. And we had some minimal success with this card, but for the most part, it did seem like being like all in on convoking out a big thing did not seem to be a very good thing to do in Modern. And this card was, it's a little bit unclear which of these effects is better. But what was nice about Imperiosaur is you could really just like fully build around it and like go all in. But Web of Life and Destiny, it seems like you need to play smaller enablers and also bigger payoffs at the same time, which can be kind of difficult to do. So I'm kind of thinking that Web of Life and Destiny is maybe going to be a card that you kind of end up in. Like if your brew is playing Springheart Nantuko and maybe Guide Pride and maybe some like bigger mana value cards like Warp cards or Bright Glass Gearhulk or Solitude, like maybe you play some amount of Web of Life and Destinies and you kind of play it like a 4-drop, and this is like your big 4-drop that ends the game for you. Or maybe this is a card you're sideboarding in. I'm hesitant to think that you can just build a deck that's all in on Web of Life and Destiny. I'm thinking that this is going to be a value piece that slots into kind of existing shells. I think it'll be a very fun one. I think deck building with it will be really cool. But after remembering what it was like being so in on Ancient Imperiosaur and having my heart broken over and over and over again, I'm cautiously optimistic about this one. Oh, I guess I should also say, I don't really think it's possible to play both at the same time, Imperiosaur and Web of Life and Destiny. It's like you just don't have that many like big things to put into play when you're like playing the all-in Convoke shell. At least that's my impression. Maybe you could play like Throsta in the deck too, but I'm thinking that they're probably two different decks. I think Peter Parker's Camera is my favorite card in the set, just in the sense that it's really a thought-provoking card. It's a 1-mana artifact, which means you can really build your deck around it because you can get it off Urza Saga. It enters with 3 film counters, and you can copy an activated or triggered ability by tapping 2 mana, removing a film counter, and tapping the camera 2. Now, this is a card that I think might just be good in more normal affinity builds. There are a lot of good things to copy just for like minimal value, and you get it 3 times. And I'll say that in Modern, there are very few actual artifacts that cost 1 mana that you can get recurring value from. You might remember Arkham's Astrolabe is now a card that's banned in Modern, and a big part of that was how it helped you fix your mana off of just a bunch of basics. But another part of it was that it was just a really good Mox Opal enabler, Arkham's Astrolabe. And I think Camera could fulfill a kind of a similar role in the Opal decks, where you can copy Tomio Clue token triggers, copy the card draw from Clue tokens. You could copy the Tomio activated abilities, the plus or the minus. You can copy Urza Saga Chapter 3, so you can tutor 2 things. You can copy Thought Monitor's ETB, so you can draw 4 cards. You can copy Emery's activated ability, so you can cast 2 things. You can copy Urza's ETB ability, so you can make 2 constructs. And so, like, you're almost always going to have something to target for a little bit of value. Even like a Mishra's Bubble draw trigger, you could just draw an extra card with it. And so I like that you kind of always have something extra. You could copy a portable hole. This isn't an exhaustive list on the screen here. There's just so much to do. So I think the camera slots really well there. I have not figured out if there's like a bigger combo or more synergistic deck you could go with it. Is there something weird that you could do with like Enigma Jewel, Paradox Engine? Probably not. That sounds like a little bit of a train wreck. That doesn't mean I'm not going to try, but at the very least, I'm interested in these like affinity shells. Red alert, red alert. We have a 1-mana blue legendary creature that cares about artifacts. This means a third Mox Amber enabler has hit the affinity deck. This is Lady Octopus Inspired Inventor. It's a 1-mana 0/2. Whenever you draw your first or second card each turn, you put an Ingenuity counter on Lady Octopus, and it's very simple. You can tap Lady Octopus to cast an artifact with mana value equal to or less than the number of counters on Lady Octopus. There is kind of an interesting little or synergy where you can like cast a Lotus Bloom if you untap with Lady Octopus and just plop that bad boy into play. Now, I've heard a lot of people excited about this interaction, this synergy. I am not very optimistic that this is going to be a good plan, although I could maybe see it being a part of Belcher. Especially because you could also cast Belcher a little bit later with Lady Octopus. But the problem with, like, just imagine this is your opening 7. You have a Lady Octopus, you have an island, you have a Lotus Bloom, you have 4 other cards, and you decide to play your Lady Octopus turn 1. You don't play your Lotus, you don't suspend your Bloom on turn 1 because you're about to cast it with Octopus, but then your Octopus just dies to a Lightning Bolt or a Fatal Push. And you just kind of time locked yourself because you haven't suspended the Lotus Bloom yet. So I'm pretty worried about this dynamic with Octopus and Bloom. I could see this being a part of Blue Belcher, though. We have played Belcher with Mox Opal and Mox Amber, and it has felt like it's been missing a little piece. So I'm going to try it there. I'm going to try it with Lotus Bloom, but I'm a little bit more thinking that Lady Octopus is just going to be a bit more of a normal affinity card, where you're just going to untap with it and you're going to cast a Peter's Parker camera, or maybe you cracked a bobble on your opponent's turn, you untap, you get 2 counters, and just for 0 mana you put a Cranial Plating into play, or you get to cast Pinnacle Emissary from your hand just for a free tap. I think this is going to be like a nice little mana dork in your blue affinity deck that is mostly a Mox Amber enabler, where you can play this as like Emery Tomio 9 and 10, and then you can play 4 Mox Ambers really comfortably, and you have a lot of really explosive starts, and Lady Octopus can contribute to these explosive starts a little bit better too, because it's a mana dork. Now, one issue is that a lot of the affinity cards you play cost 0 or they cost a lot more, right? So it's like Thought Monitor, Kappa Cannoneer, and then like a lot of 0 drops. And so you might need to be a bit more mindful about playing stuff like Simulacrum Synthesizer or more Cranial Platings. Just things you can cast with Lady Octopus is something that you're going to have to do that a lot of these builds aren't super good at doing. So keep an eye out. I think this card is really interesting. Just also very scary. That's a 1-mana blue legend with 2 toughness that cares about artifacts. Mox Amber gets better every day. The Soul Stone is a little bit of a teaser card. I think it's likely we're going to get the rest of the Infinity Gauntlet Stones later, so the Soul Stone might end up one day being a really crazy card that's a part of Thanos' Infinity Gauntlet, and you get all the stones and you win the game, and that probably won't be good in Modern. But until then, I actually think the Soul Stone is pretty playable in current Modern Blink decks. It's by itself, it's a 2-mana indestructible mana rock that taps for black, and I really like that this, in a lot of ways, it doesn't even slow you down very much at all. You can just play the Soul Stone, cast a Thoughtseize or a Fatal Push, and then like continue on your day. And it has this extra ability, 7 mana, tap, and you get this infinity symbol that basically gives you an Emeria. At the beginning of your upkeep, you get to return a creature from the graveyard to the battlefield. Now, this is like Emeria, but it's way, way better because it will actually happen, I think, more often, or at the very least, like, it'll be more helpful early. Like, if you just play 1 Soul Stone in your current Modern Blink decks, this is going to give you the ability to double spell on turn 2 with a Thoughtseize or Fatal Push, and then let you hardcast Overlord sooner, and hardcast Quantum Riddler sooner, and hardcast Solitude sooner, and then it gives you just like this really nice degree of inevitability in the late game by just activating and then returning the stuff. And you already have a lot of late game grind potential, but this is going to be a tool that will be good in mirrors, good against Boros, just like a nice way to say, "Ooh, I win." And an "Ooh, I win" button is really nice on your mana sources, but again, the key difference between Soulstone and Emeria is that this is a untapped mana rock and this is a tap land, and 2 mana untapped mana rocks I think are just mostly better. So I'm excited to play this in Blink decks. I think that you probably won't play more than 2 copies. I think that 1, there's a good chance becomes kind of stock, and then 2 copies becomes like, this is like you really like Soulstone. And then maybe you play in some like weirder like mono black builds with Overlord of the Baelmerk, but for the most part I think this is going to be like a 1 or a 2 of them Blink, and I think it'll be pretty stock. Symbiote Spider-Man reminds me a lot of Detective's Phoenix. So it's a 3-mana 2/4. When it deals combat damage to a player, you can look at that many cards of your library. So 2 cards unless it has its power enhanced, and you put 1 of them in your hand and the rest in the graveyard. So much better than just drawing a card. Doesn't trigger Orcish Bowmasters, but if your power is buffed, like if you put a Detective's Phoenix on this, you could like look at the top 4 and then dump a bunch of cards in the graveyard for value. I think that could be pretty cool. But it's also like Detective's Phoenix in the sense that from the graveyard, you can exile it and put a counter on any creature, and then that creature gains this ability too. So like imagine like on turn 2, you play Fear of Missing Out, you discard Symbiote Spider-Man, then you activate this ability, you hit your opponent, look at the top 3, 1 in your hand, 2 in the graveyard, then do it again, top 3, 1 in your hand, 2 in the graveyard. It seems pretty powerful to me. It doesn't seem like something you want to play necessarily as a 4 of, but I think one thing I really do like about this card is that if your opponent has a lot of graveyard hate, you just play this card as a creature. You can also give this card haste with Arena of Glory for some good value. I think it's pretty nice, and I'm going to be looking to play it in whatever weird FOMO Hollow One strategy we build out of Spider-Man. I also really like Eddie Brock. Eddie Brock is a 3-mana 3/3. When it enters, you return target creature with mana value 1 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Then, if you have 6 mana, 3 Jund and 3 non-Jund, it turns into a 5/5 Menace Trample Haste. So in the very, very late game, you can play this and flip it in the same turn in theory and attack with it. And when it attacks, you can sack another creature. If you do, you draw X cards and put a permanent with mana value X or less from your hand onto the battlefield. That's not that important. It is cool that Eddie Brock has like this kind of late game flip potential. Like that's not nothing. Like especially if you're playing a kind of Jund mid-range deck, this will happen. You'll activate this and you'll kill your opponent with it a bit more than just by having a 5/5 Menace Trampler is probably going to do more damage than this whole convoluted ability. But quite simply, Eddie Brock is interesting because there are a lot of really good 1-drops in Modern. Between Nethergoyf and Dragon Ray's Channeler and Guide of Souls and Ocelot Pride and Stitcher Supplier, Asmo, like there's just a lot of good stuff to get back. I do think it's like particularly more fun with Stitcher Supplier, where you can go like play Supplier turn 1, sack it to Phyrexian Tower, bring back cast Eddie Brock, bring back another Supplier, and then your graveyard is really full. Like I think that's really cool, but I also could just see Eddie Brock being a good way to bring back Guide, Pride, Ragavan, and Nethergoyf, just like the good Mardu cards. And so it is a little bit awkward that Eddie is like, it's like good with the Mardu cards, but it's a Jund card. So maybe if you're playing like a Mardu deck that's playing some combination of Ragavan, Goyf, Channeler, Guide, Pride, maybe you play like 1 green source so you can flip an Eddie in the late game. I think that's kind of cool. Maybe your splash Haywire Might too. You can bring back Haywire Might, activate it. Maybe you should have had that one here, but it's kind of a nice value card, and I think it's cool that it gives like a good amount of value early, and then it's even though it's just a 3-mana 3/3, your opponent does have to like deal with it eventually, or it's gonna flip and kill them. So cool card. I like Eddie. Hobgoblin, Mantled Marauder. It's kind of a weird combination of Flameblade Adepts and Slickshot Show Off. It has Slickshot Show Off stats, Flying Haste, but instead of getting +2/+0 whenever you cast a non-creature spell, it gets +2/+0 whenever you discard a card. So you get paid off for stuff like Faithless Looting and Street Wraith and Burning Inquiry. And I do think like casting this and then casting a Burning Inquiry and cycling a Street Wraith and dealing 9 damage on turn 3 in the air, it does seem pretty powerful. Where'd I go? That being said, and you might have noticed in this video, like these Hollow One decks have a lot of options. They have so many different tools you can play, and I don't know if Hobgoblin is going to be like the best in slot. It really does compete with a lot of stuff. It's also legendary, so that's kind of a downside, but it does mean that the first copy is maybe pretty good. So you just might see more deck building that's like less 4-ofs and more split threats, especially because a lot of these are legendary. So I do like this card. I think that it is playable in these shells, but again, these shells have so many tools that it's unclear to me that this card is going to be the best in slot, but we'll find out after some playtesting. Scarlet Spider Kane is a 2 mana 2/1 menace. When it enters, you may discard a card, and if you do, you put a counter on him. And you can mayhem it for just 1 mana. So if you've discarded this turn, it's a 1 mana 3/2 menace that lets you discard another card, because if you're playing this card, you're a deck that wants to discard a lot of cards. Can have haste if you give the haste with Arena of Glory, which is something you're going to want to do in these kind of decks a lot of times, giving stuff like Fear of Missing Out, haste also. And I think it's really cool that on turn 2, you can go cast Faithless Looting, discard Scarlet Spider, then mayhem him for 1 mana, and that gives you a total of 3 cards you've discarded to cast Hollow One. I think this is also cool that this is like a cheap red creature to cast, so you could also play Vengevine with Scarlet Spider, and so you could like discard Scarlet Spider, discard Rootwalla, and then cast Rootwalla, cast Scarlet Spider, and then bring back your Vengevines. I think that that's kind of interesting also. So I like this card. This is probably not, like there are a lot of cards you could play in these Hollowvine decks. I don't know that this is going to be the most optimal because there are just so many different ways to build it. I think that it's likely that you end up playing less than 4 copies, which is something you're going to see a lot about what I'm saying about cards in this video. It's true, I think, of Lady Octopus, and it's true of the Soulstone. I think it's going to be true of Eddie. Like, these are cards that fit in, Sandman too. These are cards that fit in decks, but they're just not a 4 of. This is partially because they're legendary, but it is also partially of just how they play. Like, this is a card that you kind of want access to, but it's unlikely you want to draw multiple copies in your opening hand. Rent is Due is a very funnily named 1 mana white enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, you may tap 2 untapped creatures and or treasures. If you do, draw a card. Otherwise, you sack this enchantment. This card is pretty interesting. I think that it could go in something like this, like the mono white Collector's Cage shell, where as soon as turn 1, you can start drawing cards with it. You play Rent is Due, you play an Ornithopter Might, and then you just get to immediately draw a card and keep filling up your hand. And then I think the other really good white cards in the format play well with this card. A Johnny by itself lets you start tapping to draw cards. So does Ocelot Pride by itself over the course of a couple turns. Like, the white decks are just really easily able to dump a lot of creatures into play, and access to a 1 mana Phyrexian Arena that draws a card at the end of your turn instead of your upkeep. It's pretty interesting. It seems very powerful if you can make it work. There are very few decks that can make it work, but I'm interested in jumping through some hoops for 1 mana white Phyrexian Arena. This is probably the kind of shell we'll start it in, but it's possible we try it in some Affinity shells. You could play in some Goblin Bushwhacker shells, stuff like that. I think the card is really cool. Strength of Will is a card that I looked at. I didn't think it'd be very good, and then I realized that there is an infinite combo with this card, in specifically modern Hardened Scale. So if you have a Hardened Scales and you have a Walking Ballista, and you cast a Strength of Will on your Walking Ballista, it gets this ability. Until end of turn, target creature you control gains indestructible, and when this creature is dealt damage, you may put that many counters on it. So you'll have a 2/2 Ballista because you had a Hardened Scales. You remove a counter, ping, 2 more, 2 counters come on it, remove a counter, ping, 2 more, and then you get infinitely big, and then you can ping them. And what's kind of cool about having access to something like Strength of Will is that having this card might just be okay to have in your deck anyways. It might be a good protection spell. It might be like a good way to just put a lot of counters on something anyways, and then you have access to this infinite combo. And I think very much in line with a lot of the other cards in this set, not Rent is Due, but most of the other ones, this is something that you probably want to play like 2 of in Hardened Scales. So where it's just a nice protection spell that you can randomly steal a game with as soon as turn 3 with an infinite combo. I think it's really cool. I'm definitely interested in trying it. There's been times where I felt like I'm a Hardened Scales expert. It's been a long time since I've really dived deep into the archetype, but this is really giving me a lot of excitement for it. And speaking of cards that give me excitement for older archetypes we've worked on, this is Parker Luck. It's a 3 mana enchantment that says at the beginning of your end step, 2 target players each reveal the top card of their library, so you and your opponent in Modern. And each of you lose life equal to the mana value of the card your opponent revealed. And then you get to draw that card. So this is specifically a combo with Witch's Cottage, which is a card we used to brew around a lot in combination with Calibrated Blast. So the idea is that you would try to use a Witch's Cottage to put a Shadow of Mortality or a Troll of Khazad-dûm or a Scion of Draco on the top of your library, or sometimes like a Murktide Regent, and then you would cast Calibrated Blast and you would deal your opponent 12, 15 damage. And so what's cool about Parker Luck is one, it gives you redundancy to Calibrated Blast, where you can play both of them in your deck if you want to, or you could just play Parker Luck. And you can maybe even be mono black too, although we'll get into it later. But it also gives you that recurring ability too. You're like a little less in on your single Calibrated Blast because it's just triggering every turn. And I'm also like particularly excited about just how this card plays with Troll of Khazad-dûm, where you could go like, I'm going to Swamp Cycle Troll, I'm going to get a Witch's Cottage, I'm going to play a Witch's Cottage, I'm going to put the Troll back on top of my library, I'm going to play Parker Luck, I'm going to reveal the Troll, I'm going to put it into my hand, and then next turn I'm going to do it again. And so if you have a Troll of Khazad-dûm and a Parker Luck, this is just going to deal 6 damage to your opponent every single turn, which is a lot of damage in a way that is not very interactable. So I'm definitely excited to try this. The Witch's Cottage Calibrated Blast stuff was something we've trophied with a bunch with. We had a lot of different builds. It's really cool. But this was also pre-Modern Horizons 3. And I don't know if you've noticed, the format's power level has increased a lot since Image 3 came out. So this may be something that just totally flops, but I'm very excited for it. I think specifically the interaction with Troll is cool. And it should also be noted that this is a black Calibrated Blast. And if you're trying to combo it with Witch's Cottage, a card that requires all swamps, I think it makes deck building easier too, which is probably going to be a bigger deal than you might think. Spider Sense is maybe the hardest card to evaluate in the Spider-Man set. It's kind of like a weird consigned to memory / protection spell. It's a 2-mana instant that says counter target instant, sorcery, or triggered ability. And honestly, you're probably going to cast this for 2 mana pretty often, but you can also web slinging it for 1 mana. So you can use this to save your creature from an opposing removal spell and bounce it back to your hand, or you could use this to like get in with your Phantom, attack with your value creature, then you counter their thing, and then you get to replay the card for more value. Very, very hard card to evaluate. It's possible that you want to be playing this in Affinity too, so this is going to be something that lets you like bounce your Thought Monitors back to your hands or your Pinnacle Emissaries so you can get more value off of them. You tap them to Springleaf Drum so you can cast this. And this is also like your way to counter Wrath the Skies. I think that could be kind of interesting too. Again, this card is very hard to evaluate. I'm going to try putting it in some decks. I think it's unlikely we're going to like build a deck around Spider Sense, but if I can find opportunities to play it, if I'm playing Springleaf Drum decks, if I'm playing decks with ETBs, I'm really going to try to prioritize playing with it because this is just the kind of card you don't know how good it is until you've, cast it a few times. Doc Ock's Tentacles is a weird one that I think just happens to fit with a lot of the good cards in Modern. So it's a 1 mana, not legendary equipment that says when a creature you control with mana value 5 or greater enters, you can attach Doc Ock's Tentacles to that creature, and it's just a 1 mana equipment, gives +4/+4. There just so happen to be a good amount of 5 mana value creatures that see play in Modern right now that you try to cheat into play. So Quantum Riddler, Overlord, Solitude, these are cards that you're trying to cheat into play with Ephemerates and sometimes Felias. And if you're ever playing a deck that's containing these cards and containing Urza Saga, which we have done sometimes in brews, but it doesn't happen very often, you will probably want to play 1 copy of Doc Ock's Tentacles to just be able to increase your pressure, make your Riddlers bigger than their Riddlers, have a giant 7/6 lifelinking Solitude. That seems pretty good to me. Also, in regular Affinity, I guess I didn't put Thought Monitor up here, but just like slapping this onto a Thought Monitor for 0 mana does seem pretty good. Although maybe you could play Riddler and Thought Monitor in the same Affinity build, which could be good too. So I like it. I think I definitely am interested in trying it. Maybe it'll just end up more of like a Affinity Riddler Thought Monitor type card, but I would really want to have some 7/6 Solitudes. That sounds really fun. Spider-Woman Stunning Savior, pretty cool card. It's a 1 generic, 1 white blue Hydra, 2/2 flyer. It says artifacts and creatures opponents control enter tapped. This card is hard to evaluate. It does have some pretty relevant text against stuff like Goryo's Vengeance, Through the Breach, makes Mox Opals enter tapped, makes all of your opponent's artifacts enter tapped so they can't cap a Cannoneer. The thing is, it's like, against this kind of stuff, Spider-Woman isn't the most effective thing. You'd rather have Containment Priest against this other stuff. You'd rather have, not Aethersworn Canonist, Collector Oof, or Kataki against the artifact stuff. But maybe this is the kind of card you main deck in a deck like Boros Energy. It helps you race, and you would main deck it because it also gives you a little bit of nice extra value against stuff like this. It makes stuff like Expedition Map intertapped. There's like little stuff, and it's unlikely that that's the case. I do not think that Spider Woman is the kind of card that you want to main deck, at least right now. But it's interesting. It could be a weird metagame card, and it could also be the kind of card that just plays better than it looks. Height of the Ceiling is also tough to evaluate. It's blue X, exile X target artifacts and creatures, and you return them to the battlefield at the beginning of their owner's next end step. Being an X spell is pretty cool. You get to like maybe get a lot of value from this if you're flickering like a lot of cryogen relics and thought monitors and stuff. But you can also target your opponent's stuff and like bounce Urza Saga tokens, Johnny tokens, etc. It's also pretty cool that this is a card that returns things at the beginning of the next end step. So you can actually respond to a Wrath Disguise and save some of your stuff. But not your tokens, which is maybe a big part of the problem here. But I think it's kind of cool that in response to Wrath, you can just save X things. It is, again, particularly interesting with Cryogen Relic. This is a card that draws a card when it enters or when it leaves. So if you target with Height on the Ceiling, you get to draw 2 for each time you target a Cryogen Relic. And maybe you just drew 2 Cryogen Relics, and then Height of the Ceiling becomes 3 mana, draw 4 cards, which is pretty good and can scale well later. I think that this is probably not going to be the best way to build an affinity deck with like relics and Height on the Ceilings, but it is interesting, and the ceiling is definitely really there. So I'm open to trying it. It probably won't be something I get to super early, but I could definitely see this being the kind of card I like playtest off stream and it really impresses, and then we have like kind of a breakthrough. I like Shadow of the Goblin. It's a 2-mana enchantment that says at the beginning of your first main phase, you discard a card, then you draw a card. So of course this enables a lot of good cards already in Modern, like Detectives Phoenix, Flage, Blazing Rootwalla, but it also enables the Madness cards we've talked about, Carnage, and the Scarlet Spider, where it's really relevant that this is a 0-mana discard effect, so you just have full reign to cast your Mayhem cards without worrying about having to spend mana on other discard outlets. I also do really like that this is the same line of text as Unstable Amulet, or similar. Whenever you play a land or cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So I do have a little bit of a daydream of like playing Ruby Medallion and Shadow of the Goblin and Unstable Amulet and Manamorphose and just like pinging my opponent by casting like Blazing Rootwallas and Detectives Phoenixes and Lava Darts and stuff like that, and unlikely to be a very competitive strategy. It is cool that like you could also like Reckless Impulse deal damage. It's cool that you have redundancy to the amulet. It's cool that this gives you like a degree of card advantage. It sounds so fun, but I think that this is mostly going to be like something that you play probably not as a 4 of, but as maybe if you want extra discard enablers for your Hollow One aggro type strategies, you could probably look to play 1 or 2 of these. Spider-Punk came to Modern a little late. Other creatures you could have Riot. It has Riot, which means it can either enter with a +1 counter or haste. It's a 2/1 at the base. Spells and abilities can't be countered, and damage can't be prevented. So I think if the Ring was still legal in Modern, Spider-Punk would be like a really cool tool for like Boros to fight the One Ring. But the Ring is banned. So for the most part, I think that I could see Ruby Storm playing a copy of Spider-Punk to wish for, and you get to play it, and then your stuff becomes uncounterable, and you get a little bit of extra value because it's a creature that costs 1 mana off your Ruby. It's not even clear to me that that's better than a Silence, but I could see wanting to try this in Ruby Storm. So very fringe, unfortunate, but it made the list. Supportive Parents, I don't think that this is going to be a card that does a lot in Modern, but it is really worth noting that this is not really an effect we have in the format. You might think it is, but it isn't. This is a 3-mana 3/3, has this ability, tap 2 untap creatures you control to make a mana of any color. This is similar to Legacy's Birchlore Rangers, and I've wished for a long time that Birchlore Rangers was legal in Modern for Modern Elves. This lets you tap 2 untapped elves for a mana of any color. Now, Supportive Parents has some advantages, right? Where this lets you tap any type besides elf. So you can tap like Springheart Nantuko tokens, and you can tap Grist tokens and stuff like that, and potentially make a lot of mana, potentially combo off. I think that the card is very likely going to be too slow and too fragile for you to meaningfully combo off with this card. I think that we're not quite there in the format. That doesn't mean I'm not going to try to build a deck with it. It could end up impressing a little bit, especially with Green Sun Zenith in the format. But for the most part, I don't think supportive parents are going to be the best way to win matches of Magic the Gathering. Um, that being said, it's important that you know this card exists because it's very possible another payoff for this enabler gets printed at someday, and then you can let your supportive parents support you all the way to top 8 of a tournament. Rocket powered Goblin Glider, say that 5 times fast, is a pretty interesting card. It's a 3 mana equipment, it mayhems for 2, and if you mayhem it, you get to attach it to a creature for free, and it gives a creature +2 flying and haste. Now, I think this card would be a lot more interesting if Arena of Glory didn't exist, where you could just haste most of the creatures you're casting in these decks anyways, so for that reason, I don't think Rocket Power Goblin Glider is going to make the cut in these lists. I think it could surprise you. I think maybe you want to see it play as a one of. It's also possible that there's some weird convoluted combo that, Anger isn't legal in Modern, but now you have a way to give haste from the graveyard. As far as I know, nothing is coming to brain for this as an enabler, but it is super unique and super cool, and now it's on your radar. Oscorp Industries, very cool land. You can play it as your land from turn from the graveyard if you've discarded this turn. Incredibly unique. The closest card to this is Dakmor Salvage, the land that has dredge, but this is like kind of a step up from that if you're just trying to like discard a card and get value from it. I could see wanting to play Oscorp Industries, maybe less so in like Hollow One aggro style shells, which really do hate playing tap lands. And maybe this is more of like a Grixis Faithless Looting control deck where you just want some good cards to discard to value to Faithless Looting, so you can use it a little bit more like a card draw spell, and you can kind of play a slower game where you cast a looting, discard this, play a land, and then you're just again using looting as a card draw spell rather than like a powerful enabler. So very cool card, very unique. One thing I don't really like so much about Modern is that there are a lot of really cool utility lands like this, and most of them are just worse than playing fetch lands and surveil lands, which is kind of sad. Anti-Venom is the kind of card I would usually dismiss right away. This is 5 white mana, so I do not recommend registering Anti-Venom if you have any land in your deck that doesn't tap for white, although with fetch lands, that's not too hard a hurdle to jump through. It's a legendary creature. When it enters, if it was cast, you return a creature from your graveyard to play. And if any damage would be dealt to Anti-Venom, you prevent that damage and put that many counters on him. So quite simply, we're seeing a Modern format where we're going to late games more often. Bigger creatures are being played, like Quantum Riddler, Overlord, and of course Solitude. And in these matchups, I do foresee casting Anti-Venom and returning Overlord of the Veilmerk, or a Riddler, or a Solitude, or maybe a Frog, or maybe a Ketramos, or something like that. I foresee that being a pretty powerful thing and a pretty reasonable thing to do in these matchups. So the casting cost is really turning me off. So like the problem is I would maybe want to sideboard this in, the sideboard of the Blink Mirrors for these kinds of matchups. Although like maybe you just want to play Elishnorn instead. But you would really need to jump through some hoops in your mana to make this work. So I could see Anti-Venom being more so like a main deck card that you're playing it in black-white blink, and you feel like this is giving you a good edge against like Boros, where it like gets really big really quickly and is a nice 2-for-1, and it's also good in the blink decks, and you're not playing more than like maybe 2 copies, and it would have to be like a much slower format. But the card looks pretty pretty interesting, pretty powerful, and just like a 5-drop that comes with another 5-drop slap to it just could be good like in this environment where games are long and games are grindy. Urban Retreat is really cool. I don't think it's very good. It's a Bant land. It enters tapped. For 2 mana, you can return a tapped creature to your hand and put into play, so it kind of gives it web slinging. This would be really good if you could activate it at any time. It would like serve as like a protection spell sometimes, which would be really cool, but you can only activate it as a sorcery. So maybe there's some stuff with like landfall. Maybe there's some stuff with wanting to like reuse ETB triggers. Maybe there's a weird infinite combo with it. I tried to go through some loops with like a Boreal Grazer and Amulet of Vigor and Bounce lands, but for the most part, I felt like those loops seemed worse than existing loops in the deck. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I need to put a little bit more time into it, but I don't think this is going to quite make the cut in any of these builds. It's possible that just the utility of an effect like this is going to be good enough. But like I mentioned earlier, it's so difficult to play a cool utility land in Modern because you have fetch lands and surveil lands. Every fetch land just gives you so much utility because it can be any color and it can also fix your draw steps. So very sad about Urban Retreat. I want to be wrong about it, but I don't really recommend registering this very often. Very, very minor interaction, but Masked Meower is a slightly power crept Insolent Neonate. This has haste, Neonate doesn't. They can both cost 1 red mana, they discard a card, you sacrifice it, you draw a card. Sometimes you want to play this in Vengevine Shells. I think time has passed, and I don't think you want to do this anymore, but occasionally, I think about Neonate, and this is slightly power crept. I know other people are going to talk about it. I don't think that this is modern playable, but you might. So Craven Proud Predator, this is a 3 mana, star 4 vigilance, so it has X power and 4 toughness. It has power equal to the greatest mana value among permanents you control. So there is an interesting sequence where you play Scion of Draco on turn 2, and then on turn 3, you haste Craven the Hunter with Arena of Glory, and you have a 14-4 trample haste. That does sound pretty good when you pull it off. Craven will be pretty bad to mediocre every single other time you draw it. It's very good when you have turn 2 Scion that lives and doesn't get countered, and it's like the worst in slot when it doesn't. So you might think that this is worth playing in your Domain Zoo decks. I don't think it is. That's up for you to determine. This is the interaction. This is the synergy. I don't think it makes the cut. Let me know if you think it does. Interdimensional Web Watch. This is a 4 mana artifact. When it enters, you get to like Reckless Impulse. Look at the top 2, and until the end of your next turn, you can play those cards. And you can tap it to spend 2 mana to play spells from exile. So this is my one allowed pet card per set review. I'm going to try to build a deck around this card. I'm going to try to go really crazy with it with Paradox Engine. I'm going to really try to break this. I do not think it's going to happen. I think that it's going to be kind of an abject failure. I just really like this card. This card sparks my imagination. It makes me excited about deck building with it. And I don't expect it to be very good, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to try. It may not make the stream, but I was just so excited for this card. Scout the City is the kind of sideboard card you might play if Murktide Regent and Abhorrent Oculus are popular, and you're also playing Malevolent Rumble. So it has 2 modes: destroy target creature with flying, or mill 3 cards, put a permanent among them into your hand, and then you gain 3 life. So less efficient than Malevolent Rumble, but if you want to kill some flyers, this does a similar thing most of the time, and sometimes let you snipe the flying creature. Heroes Hangout is a card that I think you should go to your attention here. It's 1 red mana, exile the top 2 cards of your library, you choose one of them, and then you can play that card until your next turn. There's a really, really bad combat trick here. It's a sorcery speed, 2 creatures gain +1/+0 first strike. You might cast this occasionally, but it seems pretty bad. But just this effect here, it's like basically a red sleight of hand. This doesn't exist. This is the only like 1 mana, look at top 2, play the card. There are a few that let you look at just the top card, like Experimental Synthesizer, but this is the only one that does this. So if you have a weird deck that's looking for something like this, here it is. It's new, it doesn't exist, but it's unlikely to make the cut really in any strategy, right now at least. All in all, Spider-Man is definitely a lower power level standard set compared to something like Edge of Eternities or Dragonstorm, but I think it's pretty sweet. I think the cards are like weird, they're tough to deck build with, they're thought-provoking, which I think is a good spot for standard cards to be in. I'll be over at twitch.tv/aspiringspike, playing the cards on stream, doing Modern Brews all the time. I hope you join me there. Thank you for watching this video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.